everyone, and thanks for joining us on this other edition of Inside Africa. Namibia is currently experiencing the worst drought in 14 years, and even though the agricultural sector might experience the full brunt of the drought, all Namibians will be affected during this dry period, and consumers may soon begin to feel the pinch on their wallets as the scarcity of farming products on the market could lead to inflationary pressures.
Namibia's farming sector is predominantly made up of livestock with a smaller crop farming industry. 2 million cattle are spread out across the country. However, farming in Namibia can be a risky business. Dietlef Vogt owns an almost 8,000 hectare farm in the Khomas region just outside the capital Windhoek. He's been in the game for decades, but this year is a particularly difficult one. Rainfall has been far lower than expected.
Here on this farm we have been quite lucky. We have only 25% less than the average, but the neighbor farms already have, some of them have had very little rain, very little rain. There's no grazing at all. We have a little bit of grazing.
Vogt is concerned that if the drought continues for another year, his losses will be severe.
With the drought and so, it really is difficult. You can't plan ahead. You have to be... They say farmers are crisis managers. You have to be a crisis manager, because if a year like this comes, then you really have to try and manage the crisis. And many young farmers we did have some nearly 10 years of very good rainy seasons, and many farmers have stocked up to the limit, and they are really in trouble now.
Due to a lack of grazing, Vogt will have to get rid of 10% of his 600 cattle. This could rise to almost a third of his stock if the drought continues.
When the drought is over and good rainy seasons come, I want to buy stock again, then there is going to be a big demand, and it's as sure as can be, the prices will rocket sky high, and that makes it very difficult. It's really difficult to get new stock in. Everybody wants new stock, and you have to pay a high price.
But Vogt is not the only farmer in this predicament, as the entire country has not received rain.
With respect to crop farming, the irrigation farmers, yes, they had some crops there, but I think the dryland crop production actually was a total failure this year. Just to give you an indication, last year the dryland crop production produced about 33,000 or 36,000 tons of maize. This year it only produced 1,300 tons.
It's been a double knock for farmers, with beef prices also dropping by 30% compared to last year.
I think agriculture's contribution over the past years have in fact declined, which is a worrying sign, because agriculture is still the most important employer. We have in our targeted intervention program to improve that situation designated agriculture as a priority sector, and we are improving its infrastructure so that we can have improved produce volumes of products that reach the market.
Meanwhile, farmers like Vogt will continue hoping that rains expected later this year will give them some reprieve as they count their losses.
Let's now take you to Ghana, where a member of the Council of State, Dr. Edward Jade, has admonished medical practitioners to see their profession as a calling to ensure humanity and not an avenue to make wealth. Dr. Jade, who is also the immediate past dean of the University for Development Studies Medical School, added that it is only by the grace of God that people become medical professionals so they can serve as a conduit of healing and services.
Post Basic Midwifery Training School is one of 8 institutions in the Upper West region. It was established in 2010 for the training of enrolled midwives to curb the high rate of maternal and infant mortality in the region. The school is on record to have obtained a grade mark of 93.3% of its maiden licensure examination conducted by the Nurses and Midwives Council. Despite its impressive academic performance, the school is confronted with serious infrastructural challenges. The institution, in its 3 years of existence, continues to be housed at the eye care unit of the Nandom Hospital as work on the proposed new site has stalled due to lack of funds. Madam Victoria Dahoro Dangori is the principal.
We have been given some 20 computers by GIFETS, and we have received a number of mannequins from UNFP. But we have a challenge of where to mount these teaching learning materials for the practicals.
The class prefect, Ms. Albertina Gona, appealed to the government to ensure the speedy completion of the new site project to help ease the congestion. The Deputy Upper West Regional Director of Health, Dr. Kofi Issa, noted that aside the acquisition of basic skills in human anatomy and physiology, midwives are expected to be knowledgeable in the culture and anthropology of the people they serve to enable them appreciate the dynamics of the cultural beliefs of the people. The paramount chief of the Nandom traditional area, Na Dr. Puri Pubichiri, entreated the students not to lower their guard but follow the impressive academic records of their predecessors. Dr. Edward Jada, who practiced as a medical officer in the Upper West region for 30 years, appealed to health professionals to do well to sympathize with patients regardless of the prevailing conditions of service.
Medicine is a gift. No matter how hard you learn, if you are not gifted, you will not make it. You are supposed to use that to alleviate what they are suffering, pain. That's what you all said here. God cures them, but God uses us to cure them.
The DCE for Nandom, Mr. Kobot Babakupo, paid tribute to all stakeholders through whose contributions the school has grown to become formidable. He said the government will live up to its responsibility by providing the school with the needed infrastructure to enhance teaching and learning.
We are now in Kenya, where out of the 40 patients who had escaped from the Mathare Mental Hospital, at least 12 have returned. 2 of the patients returned voluntarily, 3 were sought after, and 7 were brought back by their relatives. The hospital break got Nairobians stickered and worried in equal measure.
The Mathare Mental Hospital has 75 patients undergoing rehabilitation. For some reason or other, they all tried to escape.
Watu 75 walitoroka kutoka hapa jana asubuhi. 35 waliweza kupatikana tu within the compound. 40 walitoroka jana asubuhi.
So far, we can confirm 12 of them have returned, and our team here witnessed some of those who escaped brought back by their families. Now, they might be here to get treatment for mental health, but you have to hand it to them. It did take some orchestration to manage this.
Na hata nyinyi mnafanya vizuri kutusaidia pia kueneza hii ujumbe ili waweze kurudishwa.
How did they manage, you may still be asking? Well, as my colleague Glolani Kalu illustrates here, not that he was one of them, this is how they did it. And off they went into the nearby Mathare slums. In fact, one of those who came back voluntarily was very open to share, saying it started off perhaps with some thinking the staff had gone on strike, prompting their prison break-like escapade.
Nasema kusema kweli, sisi hapa tumeletwa Mathare, tulihepa jana kusema kweli. Wewe mmoja. Mimi mmoja wao. Na tulitolewa hapa kufika saa 5 usiku, ama witness mimi nilisema hajatupatia chakula, hajatupatia madawa. Saa 5 hakuna nasi. Tukasema wamestrike kama nini. Tuanzeni kubomoa, tuende nyumbani. Wamekataa. Tukasikia hii kwanza imeanguka biku. Boom! Papa Bingi ametokea, ndio unajua Papa Bingi.
He didn't quite explain why he came back, but your guess is as good as mine. Perhaps the grass wasn't really greener on the other side of these walls. And he also gave our team a tour around the facility, which has somewhat become a second home for them. And it is back to normal. The gate that was damaged has been fixed. There is at least a guaranteed meal and periodic medication. For those still coming back, the gates are wide open, and that is why this parent was confident enough to bring her son back.
Kaniambia, mama ulinipeleka mahali baya. Na sasa huko ulinipeleka ndio kuna wasimu. wasimu wako na nguvu na wamevunja nyumba, wamevunja mlango ile tulifungiwa. Na sasa vile wamevunja mlango, mimi nikaona napaki peke yangu. Na mimi pia nikatoka na nimekuja home. Na mimi kuna wengine wamepaki pale hawajiwezi kutoka.
For the 28 remaining patients, the Mathare Hospital is patiently waiting for their comeback. But for my colleague Lolani, who was feeling quite at home,
we bring in more news from Kenya talking security issues this time around. The government is on its way to recruit 10,000 more police officers to curb insecurity in the country. Deputy President William Ruto on Monday met the Independent Police Office in Authority. This move comes hot on the heels of pressure on the government to bolster security in the country.
During the meeting, Deputy President William Ruto revealed that his office is in talks with Treasury to hire an additional 10,000 police officers to give impetus to the war against insecurity in the country. Ruto also announced plans by the government to hire up to 1,300 vehicles to cater for movement of police officers when responding to distress calls. The move comes a day after the Inspector General of Police, David Kimayo, gave a 3-day grace period for Mandera residents to voluntarily surrender illegal firearms.
We have actually been informed that quite a number of the communities have armed themselves, both communities living here, with illicit small arms and light weapons. And they have some semblance of malicious group that they are protecting the two of the clans, each of the two clans. And therefore, we have given an ultimatum.
However, reports reaching KTN indicate that no one has since heeded to that call. According to Mandera County Commissioner Michael Tialal, residents still have 2 more days to surrender their firearms, failure to which the government will use force to disarm those in possession of illegal firearms on Thursday. Further reports from Mandera indicate that normalcy is slowly returning to the region, with many residents making their way back home where they fled during the attacks. Administration police in the area have since intensified their day and nighttime patrols in efforts to enforce peace.
Now, thousands of people have been displaced in Somalia as a result of heavy flooding. The floods have also increased the risk of waterborne diseases such as cholera. The United Nations says it is planning to implement several programs to help families cope with the future natural disasters.
Floods in many parts of Somalia have claimed the lives of 7 children and displaced thousands others, according to figures released by the UN Humanitarian Office for Somalia, OCHA. The UN has listed the towns of Baidoa, Johar, Mido areas of southern Somalia as the worst affected by the recent floods. Other areas which have also been affected include Wanlawein in Lower Shabelle, Hudun district in Sol, and Daror in Senag, as well as Abudwaq in the Galgaduud region of central Somalia.
There are also still displacement nowadays because of the floods. I mean, population being displaced are priority population when it comes to, relief and assistance, from the humanitarian community.
Safety concern posed by stagnant water in some of the affected regions was also raised. The UN warned of major health risks, including increased incidences of cholera, diarrhea, and malaria. In his recent visit to Somalia, the UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Somalia, Felipe Lazzarini, said that communities in Somalia will continue to be exposed to flooding and drought.
There will be future drought in countries, there will be future flood, and to make sure that people who have not yet recovered from the previous shock have the means to address the next one. We need to invest in longer-term activities.
Farmers were not spared either, as the torrential rains affected large swaths of their farms. Flood water also destroyed the farm produce, leaving the farmers food insecure. However, the UN now says that it hopes better preparedness can help Somalis cope with future crises. This, the UN says, it hopes to achieve by building resilience that will move away from the cycle of recurring crisis as Somalia has become prone to drought and floods, among other natural calamities.
Moving on, the Addis Ababa University says rock blisters created through volcano in the Fentala district have huge contributions for researchers and tourism. The university has asked for the protection of the rocks that are widely found in Ethiopia.
Rock blisters that are said to have been created 160,000 years before are widely available only in Ethiopia. The rock blisters and the caves created as a result give the country a unique topographic feature. This has attracted scholars from around the world to study the area. The site serves for local scholars as a main laboratory for studies related with rocks and caves created through volcano. Researchers and instructors of School of Earth Science at the Addis Ababa University, Dr. Dereja Ayalew and Dr. Asfawus Nasrat explain how such rocks came into existence.
Most of the time, such kind of volcanic blisters occur when the molten rock that goes under the ground faces pressure of gas from inside and outside. If the land is wet while the magma flows, that wet particle inside the earth heats and then evaporates, but it cannot easily evaporate as the solid part from above prevents that from happening. Then it goes out in the form of a blister.
The scholars have also talked about the significance of the rock blisters in terms of luring tourists. They have stressed on the need to protect the rocks from dangers that happen due to road and other construction. Government representative Kende Hailemaram expressed commitment to preserve the rocks and pass them to posterity.
The Fentale district and the Matahara town administration have identified the tourism value of the rocks and are working for the same cause.
Now, attracted by the growing economy and peaceful environments, the Ethiopian diaspora are returning home in huge numbers to invest in sectors like hotel and tourism, manufacturing and construction. Thaddeus Gachewo, a returnee from Boston, is one of the most successful ones. He owns the country's best resort and spa chain, Kuriftu.
Ethiopia has millions of its citizens abroad. As most of African diaspora, Ethiopians living in the most prosperous nations in the universe kept their hands out of the developmental activities of their homeland. However, since recent times, things seem reassuring. Millions of dollars worth of investment is entering the country and being spent in manufacturing and service sectors of this Eastern African nation. And people like Thaddeus Getachew are the icebreakers and the profiteers of such type of investments.
As you know, coming back home it's always been a dream, and to come back and invest and to be successful is another greatest achievement that we had as a company. We worked very hard and we always wanted to be part of the development of the continent, especially Ethiopia. And thanks God we achieved it, and we are looking forward to do much better and do better in the future.
Thaddeus was born in Ethiopia, but a significant number of Ethiopians did in 1970s when the regime of former leader Mengistu Haile Mariam tormented the youth. He fled abroad. He settled in the United States and eventually opened a successful salon in a chic part of Boston. Now, Thaddeus is building an unshakable resort and spa empire, not only in his home nation Ethiopia, but also in most of Africa. This one-of-a-kind modern resort, for instance, is found just 30 kilometers out of Addis Ababa, built with elegant spa, food and drink, as well as room services. Today, looking the pioneering job of some of the Ethiopian diaspora, many citizens in similar situations are returning home and started throwing coins in the development activity of their country. Well, of course, they are also taking huge advantage of the already hitting economic activity here.
It's no doubt that Africa is rising. And at the moment, we need a lot of direct foreign investment. And there's a lot of Africans who are out there and who have resources, who have got deep pockets. And I believe bringing that money back to the continent, investing in infrastructure like this and others, will help enhance the speed of development in the continent.
African countries indeed can use a foreign investment regardless of its origins, but Ethiopia is immensely benefiting from a different kind of investment, money brought home from abroad by Ethiopians returning diaspora. Still, many say the encouraging flow of money to the country through those citizens to continue with a strong pace, cutting red tape around government offices is something to seriously consider.
We wrap up with this one that concerns sports. Coaches at the Confederation of African Football's first ever symposium say that speed and flair is one aspect of the African game that needs to be built on. They are of the opinion that countries must adopt a way of playing that sets them apart and in turn give the country an identity at the pitch.
The Egyptian capital is playing host to coaches and technical directors from across the continent as they discuss African football and how it can be improved. It is a first symposium of its kind and coaches are receptive to the idea.
And I think it's great to get all the coaches of the different countries together to pass on different ideas and talk about the game, talk about how you played a certain way, how they played a certain way, and talk about development of the game and tactics and so on and so forth.
And we can change Africa if you want to change the football, the mentality. We need plan, we need experience with other coaches, experience with these other coaches, and this is what we are here.
Coaches were also able to share their experiences with regard to their working environments.
And some of us have realized how lucky we really are with the infrastructure. For example, South Africa have got a great infrastructure. You hear about the certain teams haven't got certain things, you know, they battle to have a training field, they haven't got goalposts, it's very, very difficult.
The South African coach believes that one of the reasons some African countries do not excel when they should is the lack of identity and consistency in the game, including in his own backyard.
Well, I think for many years now, there's been, obviously development is the most important thing, you know, and we've had, I think, 10 coaches in 10 years. So each time a coach comes in, he will want to play a certain style of football, and we've been lacking an identity. We've been lacking a style of football.
The search for identity in football, however, can only be achieved if African football bodies avoid quick fixes to bad results and emphasize on giving coaches ample time to develop systems that can allow continuity in the game.
That is how we saw it until this edition of Inside Africa. Thanks for your time and keep watching Afrique Media for more news.